I don't want to beat you. I need to beat you.
People called Roman Reigns weak. That sounds crazy now. Today he is one of the toughest champions WWE has ever had. But there was a time when fans did not believe in him at all. They booed him. They doubted him. They said he was pushed too hard and too fast. And through all of that, something interesting happened. A small group of wrestlers actually beat him. Not many, just 10, and each time it happened, it told us something new about who Roman Reigns really was. Some of these losses were painful, some were shocking, some ended up making him stronger than ever. So let's count them down, from the smallest crack in his armor to the biggest moment that changed his entire career. Roman Reigns first stepped into the spotlight back in late 2012 as one-third of a group called The Shield, alongside Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose. From the very beginning, he was the powerhouse of the trio, the one who could end a match with a single devastating hit. WWE saw something special in him early on, and over the years that followed, they slowly built him up as the future face of the entire company. But that path was never smooth. For a long stretch between 2014 and 2020, large parts of the audience simply refused to accept him as their hero. They cheered his opponents instead. They chanted for other wrestlers during his matches. It was not until 2020, when he transformed into the villainous tribal chief, that everything finally clicked into place. That new character led to an incredible championship reign, lasting over 3.5 years, one of the longest and most dominant runs the company has ever produced. But dominance is never the same thing as invincibility. Across both eras of his career, the hopeful hero and the ruthless tribal chief, exactly 10 different wrestlers found a way to get their hand raised against him. None of these moments happened by accident. Each one was carefully placed into a much bigger story, whether that meant launching a new champion, closing out an old rivalry, or setting up the next massive angle for the company. So keep that in mind as we go through this list. These are not just 10 random losses, they are 10 turning points, each one revealing a different crack in the armor of one of the most protected performers professional wrestling has ever produced. Number 10. Finn Balor. Back in July of 2016, WWE had a big problem. The company had just split into 2 shows, Raw and SmackDown, and the main title, the WWE Championship, went to SmackDown with Dean Ambrose. That left Raw with no title at all. So the general manager at the time, Mick Foley, decided to create a brand new title. It was called the Universal Championship. To figure out who would fight for it first, WWE booked 2 4-way matches on the same night. Roman Reigns won his match by spearing Chris Jericho. On the other side of the bracket, a wrestler named Finn Balor won his match by hitting his finishing move, the coup de grace, on Rusev. That set up a huge main event. Finn Balor against Roman Reigns, with the winner getting a shot at the very first Universal Champion. This was Balor's first real singles match on the main roster. He had been a massive star in NXT, WWE's developmental brand, but nobody knew for sure how he would do against the main roster's biggest names. The match itself was fast and physical. Balor was smaller than Reigns, but he was quicker, and he used that speed to counter almost everything Reigns threw at him. At one point, Reigns went for his signature spear, the move that ends most of his matches. Balor saw it coming. He dodged out of the way, then leaped up and dropped his knees onto Reigns for the coup de grace. The referee counted 3. It was over. Clean. No shortcuts. No interference. Balor beat Roman Reigns. Now here is where the story gets interesting. This defeat was not really about Balor being better, it was about timing. A few weeks earlier, Reigns had been suspended by WWE for breaking the company's wellness policy. In the storyline, and honestly in real life too, this loss worked as a kind of punishment. It let WWE push a hot new star forward while quietly stepping Reigns back for a moment. Balor went on to become the first ever Universal Champion just weeks later. And Reigns, even in defeat, kept his spot near the top of the show. It looked like a normal wrestling loss, but underneath it was a business decision. Still, it counts, it happened, and it planted an early seed of doubt. If a newcomer could beat Roman Reigns clean in his very first real singles match, then maybe he was not as unbeatable as WWE wanted us to believe. Think about how unusual this really was. Wrestlers who are being built up as the top guy almost never lose their very first big singles match on the main roster to another newcomer. Yet that is exactly what happened here. WWE let a smaller, quicker athlete beat its biggest, most powerful star, cleanly, with no shortcuts, no run-ins, and no excuses. That tells you something about how WWE viewed Reigns at that point in his career. He was important, but he was not yet untouchable. He was still a work in progress, a project the company was actively shaping, testing, and adjusting in real time. This was the era before the beard grew longer, before the smirk turned menacing, before he became the tribal chief. This was still Roman Reigns, the hopeful hero, the one fans were not fully sold on yet, and a clean loss like this one simply reflected where he stood in the pecking order of the company at that exact moment in time. Number 9. Bobby Lashley. 2 years later, in the summer of 2018, Roman Reigns found himself chasing Brock Lesnar's Universal Championship. But before he could get there, he had to go through Bobby Lashley at a pay-per-view called Extreme Rules. This was not really about the title, it was about respect. Both men wanted to prove they deserved the next shot at Lesnar, and the only way to settle that argument was to fight it out. The match was a total power struggle. Lashley threw Reigns around with a spinebuster and a huge vertical suplex. He even picked Reigns up and drove him through the announce table with a belly-to-belly suplex. Reigns fired back with his own big moves, including a Superman punch to keep himself in the fight. But the finish came down to one simple question: who could hit their signature spear first? Reigns ran across the ring, looking to flatten Lashley the same way he had flattened dozens of opponents before, but Lashley beat him to it. He speared Reigns first, pinned him clean, and won the match. This one stings a little more than the Balor loss, because there was no excuse here, no interference, no trick finish. Just two powerful men, and the other guy hit his move first. It showed that Reigns' biggest weapon, the spear, could be turned against him if his timing was ever a step too slow. Interestingly, Reigns did not stay down for long. He beat Lashley in a rematch a few weeks later on Raw, and earned his shot at Lesnar anyway. But the loss itself remains one of the cleanest, most surprising defeats of his career. It proved that even his own signature move was not automatically safe once someone else learned to copy it. There is something almost poetic about losing to your own move. The spear had become Roman Reigns' calling card by this point in his career, the finishing blow that ended countless matches in dramatic fashion. Fans knew it was coming. Announcers hyped it up every single time he set his feet and stared down an opponent across the ring. But wrestling is built on moments like this, where a signature weapon becomes a liability the instant someone else masters it faster. Bobby Lashley did not need a trick or a distraction. He simply won the race. He got there a split second sooner, and that tiny sliver of time was the entire difference between victory and defeat. It is a small, quiet kind of lesson buried inside a loud, physical match. It is also worth remembering that this loss never actually hurt Reigns' long-term push. Within weeks, he had already avenged it, beating Lashley cleanly on Raw and earning the very championship opportunity the two of them had been fighting over in the first place. That quick turnaround says a lot about how WWE viewed this particular defeat. It was never meant to be a lasting mark against him. It was simply a stepping stone, a way to make Lashley look credible for a few weeks, while still keeping Reigns firmly on track toward the biggest prize in the company. Wrestling often works this way. A loss does not always mean a step backward. Sometimes it is just a brief detour on the road to something much bigger. Number 8. Baron Corbin. Fast forward to December of 2019, right before Roman Reigns became the version of himself we know today, the Tribal Chief. At this point, WWE was still figuring out what to do with him. He was caught in a strange, transitional era, feuding with a wrestler named Baron Corbin. Their rivalry boiled over at the TLC pay-per-view, which stands for Tables, Ladders, and Chairs. That means almost anything goes. Weapons are legal, interference is common, and chaos usually decides the winner. That is exactly what happened. As the match went on, Dolph Ziggler and a tag team called The Revival showed up and attacked Reigns. They hit him with chairs. They used their tag team finisher on him, while he was already worn down. Then Corbin capitalized. He grabbed a steel chair, set Reigns up, and hit his finishing move, called End of Days, driving Reigns face first into the chair. The referee counted 3. Corbin had done it. He had pinned Roman Reigns. Here is why this one matters so much. This was the very last time Roman Reigns lost a singles match by pinfall before he transformed into the Tribal Chief and began his legendary championship reign that lasted more than 3.5 years. Think about that for a second. After this night, nobody pinned him clean in a one-on-one match for years. So in a strange way, Baron Corbin holds a permanent piece of wrestling trivia. He was the final wrestler to beat the old version of Roman Reigns before the new, terrifying version took over completely. The loss itself was messy and full of interference, but its place in the timeline gives it real weight. It is worth pausing here to notice what 2019 looked like for Roman Reigns as a whole. This was a strange, in-between year for him. He was not chasing world titles the way he had for so long. Instead, he was working through feuds with names like Baron Corbin, and around this same stretch, other opponents like Eric Rowan and even the non-wrestler Shane McMahon also managed to get their hands raised against him, almost always with with plenty of help from outside interference. It was as if WWE was quietly letting him take a breath before the biggest transformation of his career. Nobody watching at the time knew it, but this messy, interference-filled loss to Corbin was actually the calm before an enormous storm. Within a matter of months, Reigns would step away from television for a short period, and when he returned, he would come back as something completely different. The chair shot from Corbin, the Ziggler distraction, the Revival's interference. None of it looked historic in the moment. It only became historic in hindsight, once everyone realized just how long it would be before anybody pinned him again. There is a strange kind of honor in being the answer to a trivia question nobody expected to matter this much. Baron Corbin was never positioned as one of Roman Reigns' biggest rivals, and this match was never treated as a defining moment for either man at the time it happened. Yet years later, this loss stands out precisely because of what came after it. Sometimes the most important moments in a long career are not the ones that felt enormous in the moment. Sometimes they are the quiet, easily forgotten nights that only reveal their true significance once enough time has passed to see the full shape of the story around them. And this forgotten TLC match against Baron Corbin is a perfect example of exactly that kind of hidden, delayed significance. Number 7. Bray Wyatt. Roman Reigns and the late Bray Wyatt crossed paths several times over the years, and 2 of those meetings ended with Wyatt getting his hand raised. The first came at a 2015 event called Battleground. Reigns and Wyatt fought in a singles match, and things were going back and forth until a masked man showed up at ringside. That man turned out to be Luke Harper in disguise. Harper attacked Reigns from behind, and while Reigns was stunned, Wyatt hit his eerie finishing move, Sister Abigail, and picked up the pinfall win. The second big loss came over a year later, at Survivor Series 2016, in a massive 5-on-5 elimination match between the Raw and SmackDown rosters. This match went on for more than 50 minutes, which is an incredibly long time for a match with that many competitors. By the end, it had come down to just 2 men on each side. Reigns and Seth Rollins were the last ones standing for their team, going up against Wyatt and Randy Orton. Reigns tried to end it with a spear on Wyatt, but Orton saw it coming and shoved Wyatt out of the way, taking the hit himself to protect his partner. With Reigns now off balance, Wyatt struck with Sister Abigail one more time, and that was enough to win the entire match for his team. Both of these losses share something in common. Reigns was never simply out-wrestled by Wyatt in a fair fight. Both times, someone else changed the outcome, whether it was a disguised attacker or a teammate sacrificing his own body. That is a pattern you will notice again and again throughout this list. Even when Roman Reigns lost, WWE almost never let it look like a clean, straightforward defeat against a random opponent. There was almost always a bigger hand shaping the result. With Wyatt, that hand came from the strange, unpredictable world of the Wyatt family and its shifting alliances, a fitting way for 2 of wrestling's most unusual storytellers to collide. It is also worth noting how these 2 losses fit into the bigger picture of Reigns' career during this stretch. Neither one slowed him down in any lasting way. He continued climbing the card, continued chasing championships, and continued building toward the version of himself that would eventually take over as the tribal chief years later. In hindsight, these matches with Wyatt feel like a small but memorable detour, 2 nights where a strange, unpredictable force briefly got the better of him before the bigger machine of his career rolled forward again. Number 6. Sheamus. Now we get to one of the most heartbreaking nights of Roman Reigns' early career. It was Survivor Series 2015, and Reigns had just won a long, grueling tournament to capture his very first WWE World Heavyweight Championship. Fans in the arena were split, some cheering, some booing, but the moment itself was historic. Reigns was finally a world champion. Then Triple H walked out to the ring. He offered a handshake, playing the part of a gracious authority figure, welcoming the new champion. Reigns did not trust it for a second. He speared Triple H right there in the ring, refusing to play nice. But that decision left him completely open. Out of nowhere, Sheamus ran down and cashed in his Money in the Bank contract, which gives a wrestler the right to challenge for a title at any moment of their choosing. Reigns barely had time to process what was happening before the match began. He kicked out of the first brogue kick, showing real fight. But Sheamus hit a second brogue kick, and this time Reigns could not kick out. Sheamus pinned him and walked away with the championship that Reigns had worked so hard to win. His very first title reign as a world champion had lasted only minutes. This loss was designed to make people feel for Reigns, rather than laugh at him. It painted him as an underdog getting robbed by a corrupt system, someone who had earned his moment of glory, only to have it snatched away instantly. Some fans actually started supporting him more after this happened, because it is hard not to feel bad for someone who gets ambushed the second they achieve their dream. It is one of the clearest examples in this whole list of how a defeat can actually build sympathy instead of tearing a wrestler down. There is a particular kind of heartbreak that comes from watching someone win something huge, only to lose it in the very same breath. That is exactly what this moment captured. Reigns had spent an entire tournament grinding his way to the top, beating one opponent after another, finally reaching the mountaintop as a first-time world champion. Fans barely had time to process that achievement before it was gone. Whether or not people were fully behind Roman Reigns as a hero at this point in his career, it was hard to deny the very real, very human sting of watching him lose his championship before he even had a chance to properly celebrate winning it. Number 5. Braun Strowman. In 2017, WWE built one of its most physical rivalries around Roman Reigns and a monster of a man named Braun Strowman. Strowman was presented as nearly unstoppable, someone who could toss cars and flip ambulances. Their feud produced 2 defeats for Reigns that showed just how overwhelming raw power can be in this sport. The first happened at Payback in April of 2017. Weeks earlier, Strowman had actually flipped an ambulance with Reigns trapped inside it, and Reigns was still dealing with the effects of that attack, wrestling with taped-up ribs. Strowman took full advantage. He hit a running power slam and picked up the pinfall victory. After the match, he grabbed a set of steel steps and attacked Reigns even more, driving home just how dominant he had become. The two men fought again a few months later at an event called Great Balls of Fire, this time in an ambulance match, where the only way to win is to lock your opponent inside an ambulance. In the closing moments, Reigns charged at Strowman looking for his spear. Strowman stepped out of the way at the last second, and Reigns went flying straight into the back of the ambulance instead. Strowman slammed the doors shut before Reigns could climb out, securing the win. What makes these losses stand out is that Reigns was never actually pinned or forced to submit in either one. He was simply physically overwhelmed and outmaneuvered by a bigger, stronger opponent. It showed a different kind of weakness than the others on this list. Not a mental one, not a trick finish, but pure brute force getting the better of him. Even after the second loss, Reigns refused to stay down, crashing the ambulance in reverse into a trailer with Strowman locked inside, proving that even in defeat, he was not going to back away quietly. The Strowman rivalry as a whole is worth remembering because of how differently it framed Reigns compared to almost every other feud on this list. In most of his other matches, Reigns was the biggest, strongest man in the ring, the one throwing his opponents around. Against Strowman, that dynamic flipped completely. Suddenly, Reigns was the one getting tossed, the one struggling to find an opening, the one absorbing punishment instead of dishing it out. That role reversal made the entire feud feel fresh and unpredictable at the time. It gave fans a version of Roman Reigns they rarely saw, a fighter who had to claw and scrap just to stay competitive, rather than simply overpowering whoever stood across from him. Even without a single official pinfall or submission loss between the two men, the ambulance match still counted as a defeat, and it left a lasting impression of just how far Strowman had pushed him during that stretch of 2017. Number 4. Brock Lesnar. For years, Brock Lesnar stood as one of the biggest obstacles in Roman Reigns' path to the top. Their rivalry produced multiple huge matches, but 2 in particular stand out as genuine defeats. The first came at WrestleMania 34 in 2018. Almost everyone watching expected this to finally be the night Reigns beat Lesnar and became the undisputed top star of the company. Instead, WWE went a completely different direction. The match turned into a brutal, bloody battle, and Lesnar hit Reigns with multiple F5 finishers before pinning him clean to retain the title. The crowd's reaction was rough, a mix of shock and frustration, because so many fans had been waiting for Reigns to finally get his moment. Just a few weeks later, the two men met again at an event in Saudi Arabia called the Greatest Royal Rumble, this time inside a steel cage. The stipulation for this match said that a wrestler could win by escaping the cage, not just by pinfall. In the closing moments, Reigns speared Lesnar directly through the side of the cage, breaking the metal wall apart and sending both men crashing toward the floor below. But because Lesnar's body technically touched the ground first while still on top of the broken cage piece, the referee ruled that he had escaped and declared him the winner. That second loss in particular left fans arguing for years. Many felt Reigns had essentially won the fight, only to lose on a technicality that barely made sense. It gave his side of the story a built-in excuse, letting him claim some kind of conspiracy against him while keeping the rivalry alive without an actual clean pinfall defeat. Together, these two losses to Lesnar represent some of the most physically punishing moments of Reigns' career. and they remind us that even when he seemed on the verge of victory, the biggest names in the business could still find a way to deny him. It also helps to remember just how personal this rivalry felt to the fans watching at home. Brock Lesnar was marketed as an unstoppable outsider, a part-time performer who barely seemed like he belonged in the same world as everyone else on the roster. Beating him was supposed to be the ultimate proof that a wrestler had truly arrived. For years, fans wanted nothing more than to see Reigns finally get that signature win at the biggest stage possible, WrestleMania itself. When WWE chose to deny that moment and hand Lesnar the victory instead, it created one of the loudest, most divided reactions of that entire era. Some fans were furious, feeling like the promised payoff had been stolen from them. Others respected the unpredictability of it, appreciating that WWE was willing to subvert expectations rather than give the crowd exactly what they wanted. Either way, these two matches against Lesnar remain some of the most talked about, most debated losses anywhere on this entire list. Number 3. Jey Uso. By 2023, Roman Reigns had become nearly impossible to beat. He had not been pinned in any match since December of 2019. That incredible winning streak made what happened at Money in the Bank that year feel like an earthquake. The match was billed as the Bloodline Civil War, pitting Reigns and his enforcer Solo Sikoa against twin brothers Jimmy and Jey Uso, whose family had been torn apart by loyalty to Reigns. The match was emotional from the very first bell, filled with years of history between these men who had once been family. Reigns and Sikoa tried to combine their finishing moves, looking for the same kind of teamwork that had carried them through so many battles before. But something shifted. Jey Uso found the strength to fight back against the man who had manipulated his entire family for years. He countered a spear attempt with a low blow, then leaped up and hit his Uso splash. The referee's hand hit the mat 3 times. For the first time in years, Roman Reigns had been pinned. The crowd at the sold-out arena in London absolutely erupted. This was not just a wrestling result. It was years of storytelling paying off in a single moment. Jey Uso, who had spent so long standing in his cousin's shadow, finally broke free and beat him in the biggest way possible. And because this happened in a tag team match rather than a singles title match, Reigns kept his individual championship reign intact even while suffering this massive, emotional defeat. It is one of the clearest examples on this list of how a loss can be devastating and celebratory at the very same time. What made this moment hit so hard was the family element woven through every second of it. Jimmy and Jey Uso were not just tag team partners caught up in Reigns' orbit, they were blood relatives, cousins who had once stood proudly by his side as loyal members of the bloodline. Watching that loyalty crack apart in real time, watching one brother turn against the group while the other stayed locked in, gave this match a weight that a normal wrestling feud simply cannot match. When Jey finally got his hand raised, it did not feel like a random upset. It felt like the release of years of built-up pressure, resentment, and heartbreak finally boiling over in the middle of the ring. For a man who had not lost a singles pinfall in years, this defeat may have hurt Roman Reigns more emotionally than almost anything else on this entire list, precisely because of who was standing across the ring from him when it happened. Number 2. Seth Rollins. If there is one name that haunts Roman Reigns more than any other, it is Seth Rollins. The two men started out as brothers, standing side by side as part of the Shield, one of the most beloved trios in wrestling history. That made everything that came later hurt even more. In June of 2014, Rollins turned his back on his own team. He struck both Reigns and Dean Ambrose in the back with a steel chair, joining forces with the group running WWE at the time. That single moment became the defining wound of Reigns' entire career, and Rollins spent years proving he understood exactly how to exploit it. Their first major title clash came at WrestleMania 31 in 2015. Reigns was locked in a brutal match against Brock Lesnar for the championship, and right in the middle of that chaos, Rollins ran down and cashed in his own Money in the Bank contract. He hit his curb stomp finishing move on an already battered Reigns and pinned him to steal the title away from both men in an instant. It became known as one of the most famous cash-ins in wrestling history. Just over a year later, at Money in the Bank 2016, the two men met again, and this time there was no trick finish. Rollins countered a spear attempt into his own move, a pedigree, and pinned Reigns clean to win the championship. Then in 2018, during a chaotic gauntlet match, Rollins pinned him again right at the start, adding yet another notch to his growing advantage in their rivalry. But the most personal chapter came at the Royal Rumble in 2022. Rollins walked out to the old Shield entrance music, wearing the group's classic tactical vest, deliberately using their shared history as a weapon. Throughout the match, he studied and mocked Reigns' own signature movements, needling him mentally as much as physically. In the closing moments, Reigns locked Rollins in a tight guillotine choke. Rollins managed to get his arm on the bottom rope, but Reigns, consumed by frustration, refused to let go. The referee had no choice but to disqualify him. Reigns kept the title on a technicality, but he lost his composure completely, smashing Rollins with a steel chair afterward, in an eerie mirror of the very betrayal that started this entire rivalry 8 years earlier. No other wrestler on this list understands Roman Reigns the way Seth Rollins does. He is not just a rival, he is a living reminder of where Reigns came from, and proof that even the most dominant version of Reigns can still be shaken by the right person pulling on old wounds. Think about how rare this kind of connection is in wrestling. Most rivalries are built around two strangers who happen to be fighting over a championship. This one is different. Before any of these matches took place, Reigns and Rollins had already spent years together, watching each other's backs, standing shoulder to shoulder against the rest of the roster as the Shield. That shared history means every single one of their matches carries an extra layer underneath the surface. When Rollins hits a curb stomp or counters a spear into a pedigree, it is not just a wrestling move. It is a former brother proving, again and again, that he still knows exactly how Reigns thinks, exactly how he moves, and exactly where his weaknesses hide. Reigns can train harder, he can get stronger, he can add new moves to his arsenal, but he cannot erase the fact that Rollins spent years standing right next to him, learning him from the inside out. That is a kind of advantage that no amount of muscle can fully cancel out. And that is exactly why the guillotine choke moment at the Royal Rumble in 2022 hit so hard. It was not really about the hold itself, it was about control slipping away. For years, Reigns had built a reputation as someone who never lost his cool, who handled pressure with a calm, calculated smile. Rollins found the one crack in that armor. By dressing in the old Shield gear and mimicking Reigns' own mannerisms, he got inside his head just enough to make him snap. And once Reigns snapped, refusing to let go of that choke even as the referee begged him to release it, he proved Rollins right. He proved that somewhere underneath the tribal chief persona, the wound from 2014 had never actually healed. It had just been buried under years of championships and victories, waiting for the right person to dig it back up. Number 1, Cody Rhodes. And now we arrive at the biggest defeat of Roman Reigns' entire career, the one that ended his historic 1,316-day reign as champion. This story did not happen overnight. It began in 2022, when Cody Rhodes returned to WWE and declared he was going to finish the story his father, the legendary Dusty Rhodes, was never able to complete by winning the top championship. Rhodes won the Royal Rumble that year, earning his shot at WrestleMania 39, but he came up just short against Reigns, walking away without the title. Instead of giving up, Rhodes came back even hungrier. He won the Royal Rumble a second consecutive year in 2024, forcing a rematch. But right before that could happen, WWE threw a massive curveball into the storyline. The Rock made a surprise appearance, and WWE initially planned to have him challenge Reigns instead of Rhodes at WrestleMania. Fans were furious. A hashtag reading "We Want Cody" spread everywhere online, showing just how much people had invested in Rhodes' journey. WWE ultimately reversed course, letting Rhodes keep his spot, while The Rock instead turned on the fans and aligned himself with Reigns' family, known as the Bloodline. The rematch took place across 2 nights at WrestleMania 40. On the first night, Reigns teamed with The Rock to defeat Rhodes and his partner Seth Rollins, which set a special stipulation for night 2, called Bloodline Rules, meaning almost anything would be allowed. On the second night, the championship match finally happened, and it turned into one of the most chaotic, emotional matches in modern wrestling history. Wave after wave of interference rolled through the match. Jey Uso tried to help Reigns, only to get speared off the stage by his own brother Jey. Solo Sikoa hit Rhodes with his signature move, echoing the exact finish from the previous year's WrestleMania, but that brought out a surprise appearance from John Cena, who cleared Sikoa from the ringside area entirely. The Rock then got involved directly, only to be confronted by a legend of his own, The Undertaker, who took him down as well. It felt like the entire history of the company was spilling into one single match. Then came the moment that changed everything. Seth Rollins ran down to the ring wearing his old Shield gear, ready to even the odds. Reigns fought him off and stood over both Rollins and Rhodes with a steel chair in his hands. He had a choice to make. He could have used that chair to guarantee his win and protect his championship. Instead, years of anger took over. He turned and smashed Rollins with the chair, finally paying back the betrayal that had haunted him since 2014. But that choice cost him everything. With Reigns distracted by his own emotions, Rhodes recovered, fought back, and hit 3 consecutive crossroads finishing moves. The referee counted to 3. It was finally over. Cody Rhodes had done what nobody else could do in over 3.5 years. He beat Roman Reigns for the championship. The scene afterward said just as much as the match itself. Rhodes' mother walked down to the ring to share the moment with her son, completing a story that had started with his father decades earlier. Even Triple H came out to celebrate, marking the beginning of a new creative direction for the entire company. It was not just a title change. It was the ending of an era. This defeat sits at the very top of this list because of everything it represents. It was not caused by outside interference alone, even though there was plenty of chaos surrounding it. In the end, it came down to Roman Reigns choosing revenge over victory, letting his emotions get the better of him at the worst possible moment. That is what makes it so human. After years of looking untouchable, he made a very understandable, very relatable mistake, and it cost him the one thing he had protected for over 3 years straight. So what does all of this really tell us? Roman Reigns was never truly invincible. 10 different wrestlers found ways to beat him, some through pure power, some through clever timing, some through years of built-up emotional history. But here is the twist. None of these losses ever made him look small. If anything, they made his story bigger. Each defeat added a new layer to who he was. A moment where the armor cracked just enough to remind everyone that a real person was underneath it. And because of that, when he did win, when he did dominate for over 3 years straight, it meant something. It felt earned. That is exactly why Roman Reigns became one of the most legendary champions in WWE history. Not because he never lost, but because every single time he did, he found a way to come back stronger than before. Look at the shape of this entire list from start to finish. It begins with a fast, clean loss to a newcomer trying to prove himself, back when Reigns himself was still trying to prove he belonged at the top. It moves through years of physical punishment from monsters like Braun Strowman and Brock Lesnar, moments where sheer size and power got the better of him. It winds through family betrayal with Jey Uso, an old wound reopened by Seth Rollins, and finally lands on the single biggest night of his career, the night Cody Rhodes finished a story that had been building for generations. Put all of that together, and you get something much richer than a simple list of losses. You get the full arc of a career, told through the handful of moments when the story needed him to fall down so that someone else could stand up. That is really what separates a legendary champion from someone who simply holds a title for a long time. Anyone can look strong when nothing ever challenges them. It is much harder to look strong while occasionally losing, while letting other people have their moment, while allowing the story to breathe and grow around you instead of only around yourself. Roman Reigns did that 10 different times across more than a decade in the spotlight. Every single one of those 10 wrestlers walked away with a genuine moment of their own, a memory fans still talk about, a night where they stood taller than the man WWE had spent years building into an unstoppable force. And through it all, Reigns never actually stopped being that force. He simply proved that even unstoppable forces occasionally have to bend, just enough, to let the rest of the story unfold the way it was always meant to.